What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything, where you ask me, Shane Satterfield, pretty much about anything that you want. This show happens because a lot of our patrons are very generous and are pledging at $7 or more per month at patreon.com/SIFTD. If you want to support us, you like Game Face, you like Pactor Factory, you like this show, you like any of the other stuff that we do, head on over there and give us a pledge for just $5 a month. You get all our content early. $7 a month or more means that this show keeps happening. We do need questions, though. This show doesn't happen without you guys. Head on over to SIFTD.net. In the header there, there's a link. Click it. Go to our forums. Ask me a question about anything. Even if you don't pledge at all, I will still answer your questions unless somebody asks a question just as good as yours that is pledging. Then, of course, I'll answer their question. I think everybody can understand that. We have another really good slate of questions this week. Let's get to them. Okay, first up is one of our regular contributors to Ask Shane Anything, and that is Kevin. What are your thoughts on The Outer Worlds 2 being bumped down to $70 after it was announced last month that it would cost $80? Why do you think Xbox eventually decided to cut the price? Kevin, maybe they're trying to make everybody happy. It's one of those, I've talked about this before on Ask Shane Anything, people who create a problem and then they want credit for fixing the problem. But let's be honest, the psychology of the average human, it kind of works. Because they tell you it's going to be $80, you get bummed, and they drop it down to $70. You're like, oh, okay, all right, now everything's fine. Anyway, look, I understand why you're asking this question, because this is crazy. So a bunch of other publishers were talking about $80 games. Nintendo launches Mario Kart World for $80. Other publishers are saying, well, maybe not publishers, but a lot of analysts think that Grand Theft Auto could cost up to $100 or even more in some cases. So it felt like the whole industry was kind of shifting to that higher price point for some of the bigger games from each publisher. And then Xbox comes out and says, yep, we're next. So Outer Worlds 2 is going to cost $80. Here we are 6 weeks later, and Microsoft says, oh, not so fast, it's going to cost $70, which is very strange because you have to figure, or you would think anyway, that a lot of thought and data went into deciding on $80 for that game in the first place. I'm sure they looked at how long the game has been worked on, how many people have been working on it, the budget that they've spent on it so far, figuring out the interest in the game, what they're going to need to sell as far as breaking even on the game or turning a profit, God forbid, which isn't easy with the Xbox model now with everything going on Game Pass. So I kind of thought that when they announced the $80 price point, they were using Nintendo for cover, first of all, and some of the other publishers that had announced $80 games. They're like, okay, we're in the clear to do this now. But I think a lot of that was maybe Xbox saying, we're not getting our money back on a lot of these big first-party games because they're going on Game Pass and we aren't seeing our Game Pass subscriptions go up and we're not getting the money back on our investment. Maybe we need to charge $80. Also, don't forget, right now, Forza Horizon 5 is the best-selling PlayStation 5 game of 2025. So if you're Microsoft or Xbox and you're like, we're kicking Sony's ass on its own console. We're going to jack up the price of our games. They're the most popular games on PlayStation. Let's jack up the price an extra $10 and we'll make an extra $10 off of all these games that the PlayStation fans are buying from us. It made sense. A little, I don't know, some people may look at jacking up the price to $80 as something they're not excited about, but if you look at things from a business perspective, it was smart the way that Microsoft did it. And here we are, 6 weeks later. Just 6 weeks later. And I'm assuming that Microsoft got some new set of data that told it that $80 was a bad idea for The Outer Worlds 2. I mean, the first thing I'm going to say is that looking at our data on our website, The Outer Worlds 2 is not tracking well as far as interest in the game. It doesn't do a ton of views. It doesn't even have that much media. So it's not like the game has flooded the zone and people are saturated with content and promotion and previews for The Outer Worlds 2. It has like 2 trailers so far, but y'all just don't care. I'll tell you another game y'all don't care about, Ghost of Yotei. We have had 2 episodes of Game Face where that was the marquee game, the game that we put in the thumbnail for Game Face and promoted that as the biggest game in the show. Both those episodes were some of the least commented episodes we have ever done. That game also not tracking very well. That's PlayStation's other big first-party exclusive for, October, I think it comes out. I think that's the data that Microsoft is getting about The Outer Worlds 2, is that it's not tracking very well. And if that's the information they got, as someone who runs a gaming website about game news and previews and reviews, they're right. that game is not tracking very well at all. And I honestly, when I heard that The Outer Worlds 2 was going to be the first Xbox game to sell for $80, I was like, really? That game? Like, I'm excited for it. And I love Obsidian's games, and I'm sure it's going to be great. It just doesn't have a lot of interest. So I figured Microsoft would reserve Fable or Gears of War E-Day or something like that for its first $80 game. Instead, it was this. And my guess is, over time, over the last 6 weeks anyway, Microsoft has gathered data that has told it that this game is not tracking well, and if you sell it for $80, it is gonna bomb hard. So that's why I think it's happened. It's hard to believe that the data would change so much in like 6 weeks, but to be fair, the last 6 weeks have been kind of a big promotional period for the games industry when a lot of publishers kind of look at all their projects and take stock in them and see how they're doing and try to figure out if they're worth continuing. Maybe that's what's happened here. I think bottom line is it's a smart move, because I'm just telling you right now, The Outer Worlds 2 is not tracking very well as far as interest is concerned. And then tacking on the extra $10 to it, I think we just kill it. So beyond the fact that $70 games better than $80 games for the consumer, which I agree with, obviously, I think there's more to it than that. I think Microsoft realized that if it tried to release that game at $80, that it would probably going to bomb like really hard on PlayStation 5. That's one part of it. And the other part of it, too, is like, if you're going to do something big like this, make that jump up to $80. It needs to be something people are really excited about and really talking about. And I'll be honest with you, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of Xbox games that are like that. But to be fair, no one cares about Ghost of Yotei either. So I feel like there's a shift going on here in the games industry where you folks just don't get that excited or all that interested in learning about new games that are coming out. I just don't think you do. I think you've kind of shifted gears to the place where you're playing a lot of your backlog, you're playing older games, you're buying games for cheaper, you're not buying them for full price at all. That could be another problem for why Xbox decided to drop it down to $70. So, look, I don't think this is the end of $80 games for Xbox. I think next year, definitely, it will release an $80 game, and my guess is it'll either be Fable or Gears of War E-Day. Okay, our next question comes from Liberal Hack. You've always had an accepting point of view and even celebrate diversity and representation in games, women, LGBTQ, games that showcase other cultures, etc. But you also grew up in rural Pennsylvania. Have you always had these values? Did they have to develop over time? And what has your experience been like in the industry as it relates to these issues? Okay, Liberal Hack, this is a big question. But honestly, I can answer it pretty simply. It's just my parents. That's all it is. That's all it is for everybody. It's your parents. I have never met a hateful person whose parents weren't hateful. Ever. Have you? Have you ever met a racist person, a sexist person, a person who hates LGBTQ people whose parents also didn't feel that way? Nope. Nobody is born hateful. They're not. People learn hate from people around them. And so, look, you say I'm from rural Pennsylvania, which I am. But look, I don't want you to think, and I don't even know, honestly, where you live, and maybe you live in the boonies too, but I don't want you to think that, like, everyone in rural America is a racist. They're not. Like, my dad, and mostly my dad, taught me, he didn't even tell me that, like, racism is bad. Like, that wasn't something that he beat into my head or anything. He just told me to live by the golden rule, to treat people the way that you want to be treated. It's very simple. And then it doesn't matter whether they're black, brown, orange, purple, gay, straight, trans, it doesn't matter. If you live by the golden rule, you are going to treat them the way that you want to be treated. And sure, look, rural areas, there's more racists. There's no doubt about it. There's people I was around that use the N-word all the time, and you just stop hanging out with them. You don't even have to make a scene about it. You don't have to say, oh, I'm not hanging out with you because you're racist. You just don't hang out with them anymore. And suddenly they look around and they're like, there's nobody here anymore. Gee, was it me? And probably they'll say it wasn't. They won't ever accept responsibility for it. But anyway, that's how it works. Now, when I was a kid, again, my dad taught me to live by the golden rule, so I accepted everybody. But when I was a kid, like, I had a black baseball coach who would, like, took me under his wing, was kind of like my second dad. His sons ended up becoming some of my best friends. They're still good friends to this day. Here's the thing. I talked about this on Game Face not long ago. It's ignorance that causes people to be this way. It's not having experiences around other people and other cultures. It's like, so many people I know on the East Coast, and I see them right now. It's summertime, so everyone's going on vacations or whatever. I see them going on vacation. And, like, to be fair, the people that I know who are maybe a little bit that way, they always go to Florida for vacation. They're a 5-hour flight away from Europe And instead of going to Europe, they go to Florida, where they can feel safe because there's other people like them down there. They're afraid of going somewhere else where they might be exposed to a different culture that makes them feel bad about what they believe. So these people are intentionally isolating themselves from other cultures, other people, and so they're just going to stay the same. It's very hard to break away from what your parents indoctrinate you to. It just is. I even know people who would hang around our scene, the punk rock, hardcore scene, and they'd help us throw Nazis out of the shows and all that kind of stuff. But now, go look at their Facebook feed. They've completely devolved right back to who they were because that's who their parents were. It's very hard to break what your parents beat into your brain when your brain is a sponge and soaking everything up. If you're 3 years old and your parents are telling you that black people are bad, you're going to believe black people are bad. It's the same thing with religion. I don't know anybody who's crazy religious whose parents were not religious. Your parents indoctrinate you into the religion. I went to church for a long time. I was forced to go to church for a long time, not on my own volition. My mother forced me to go. I know what's up with the church. I had to go to church 2 times a week for years. And nobody I ever met there didn't have parents that were religious. You'd get like the dude or like the middle-aged guy or the middle-aged woman who is going through a divorce and they think that their life has hit rock bottom. They'll show up at church for a couple weeks. They'll realize that there's no magic wand that's going to fix their life, and you never see them again. So to me, religion, hate, it's all the same thing as far as how you learn it and why you become interested in it and kind of get sucked into it. It's your parents. As far as the industry is concerned, it's awesome. I think we've discovered over the last 5 or 6 years that it isn't all rainbows and unicorns. There are some people that I would consider bad people that are making games. That's life. Everywhere you go, there's going to be people that you disagree with, people that you think are wrong, that are bad or whatever. I would argue the games industry has the lowest quotient of those people, though, because eventually you get forced out. It's like, it's not that you get forced out because people are like, he's racist, I don't want him here. You just don't fit in. You're awkward. At company events, you're standing in the corner by yourself because you can't relate to the other people who are working at the company. And eventually, you just kind of don't work there anymore. That's just kind of how it works out. So in this industry, it is incredibly diverse. I've been very happy to discover, because I've been this way my whole life. But other people have always been the other way, and it's hard to change from the way you've been your whole life. I try to give people more slack. I try to be more open and try to talk to them. I think we all could do better if we would do that. All right, next up, we have a question from AJ, the legend. Between The Last of Us and Fallout, which TV show provides better fan service? Do you think Fallout will have a disappointing second season like The Last of Us? Wow, that's a tough question, AJ. Before the second season of The Last of Us, I would say, just based upon the first seasons of both shows, that picking between the two of them is like impossible. It's all about what you like more, I think. Whether you like sci-fi, then you probably like Fallout more. If you like horror, then you probably like The Last of Us more. Both those shows were great and did a great job servicing fans, giving them some type of a pop culture spin-off of something that they already love that they can consume. Now, personally, if I had to pick a favorite between the two, and I am a horror person, it's tough. That's how good both of them were. I don't know which one to pick, because I liked each of them for different reasons. Look, I'll say this. I think Fallout was a better representation of the video game franchise as a whole. Like, I didn't look at the Fallout show and say, well, that's like Fallout New Vegas, even though it's kind of going there now. Or that's like Fallout 3, or that's like Fallout 4, or that's what Fallout 5 is going to be like. It just was Fallout to me. And they kind of put the story in the Fallout universe, and it just worked, and they nailed all the small details and all that kind of stuff. The Last of Us was dependent on the specific games and the specific plots that happened inside the game. So some people may say that's more fan service because they don't actually stray from a very specific things that happen inside the video game. So I guess I would say The Last of Us, the first season, was better fan service. But I think the better franchise service was Fallout. Now, let's throw all that away and talk about reality here, which is we have watched the second season of The Last of Us. And I think pretty much everybody is unanimous in saying at this point that it was disappointing. And look, one thing I want to apologize for is we can't show B-roll of this stuff while I talk about it because we get copyright strikes if we show trailers for TV shows and movies. So I wish I could show you this stuff, so I'm just going to have to show you generic Fallout and The Last of Us B-roll, so you don't have to look at my ugly mug the whole time. But anyway, I do think that with the second season of The Last of Us being a disappointment, and I think even Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann feel like it was a disappointment because it was all like bells and whistles when the season was about to launch. It comes out Everybody watches it. It gets like a lukewarm response. And then like a month later, Neil Druckmann's like, I'm going back to video games. I think it was his easy out because also most of his fans are in the game space and they were begging him to come back and work on Naughty Dog's game. So it all worked out. However, taking into consideration that second season of The Last of Us did not serve fans very well at all. I feel like a lot of the narrative choices they made actually made the plot weaker than it was in the game. And I understand games are different. There's a much longer time commitment and things have to evolve a little bit slower. But just the way that they ordered things in the show, I felt like did not make it as compelling as the game did. So I'm torn, honestly, to say which one is better. I mean, at this point, I would argue Fallout is better. But you're right. Fallout's second season could come and it could suck. And I'm nervous to say that it won't because I didn't think the second season of The Last of Us would be worse than the first season. I thought they would build on the first season. It would be even better. So am I a little nervous about the second season of Fallout now? Yeah, I kind of am. Because I really thought the show team for The Last of Us could nail it the second time, and it really didn't. So, yeah, I guess that's the way I'd put it. I think The Last of Us, better fan service. Fallout, better franchise service. All right, our last question for this week's episode comes from the one and the only Zet Saber. In the last two episodes of Game Face, you and Matt brought up Nintendo and what movies it's working on. You mentioned Donkey Kong and Zelda is on the way. But could there ever be a Metroid movie? It's not as popular, but the Sonic movie revived interest in the franchise back in 2020. Could a Metroid movie do the same if the film is good? So, Zet Saber, you are not fooled. You are aware that Metroid is not that popular of a franchise for Nintendo. It's something that it feels like the hardcore base really wants, but then it feels like they don't support it when the games come out. And it's not like they're bad. I wasn't a fan of Metroid Dread, but realistically, it's still a solid game. There were decisions made in that game that kind of turned me off to the game in general because they were persistent throughout the entirety of the game, but I think most people generally liked it, and it was a quality product. It was well crafted. But most Metroid games are really freaking good. Like, a lot of people consider the early Metroid games some of the best games ever made. Metroid Prime, perfect 10 out of 10 for pretty much every outlet. It doesn't matter. People just don't care. I don't get it. I don't know that it's a female protagonist that's the problem. Because by now, everybody knows that Metroid, Samus is a female. At least I would think so. Unless you haven't been playing games at all for the last 30 years. Samus is a girl. Spoilers! Sorry to break it to you. I think most people know that at this point. And I don't even think that she's a girl that makes the difference. Obviously, that was kind of a gimmick with the first Metroid. You find out that she's a girl at the end. But I don't think people care that it's a girl. I think they're just not interested in the game and the game's world. To be fair, most of the characters in Metroid, who are they? There's Samus and Ridley, which is like a pterodactyl. There's not a cast of characters that you know that she's interacted with, that you've kind of ingratiated into your heart. It's about isolation. That whole franchise is about isolation. And that's what makes some people really like it, but I think it's also something that has kept it from growing. You just don't have a connection with a lot of human characters in the franchise. You just don't, and I think that's been its big detriment. So, back to your question about if a Metroid movie could revive interest in the franchise or put the franchise on footing where it can turn a big profit for Nintendo instead of just kind of breaking even like it has been lately. I guess. Here's the thing. I don't think a Metroid movie would be for kids. And the Sonic movie was for kids. And it's the kids that latched on to Sonic. It's not adults. It wasn't adults that like used to love Sonic, that they saw the movie and they're back. Like, that wasn't what it was. Kids saw Sonic for the first time and liked Sonic. Just like it happened to us when we were kids. They liked Sonic. And so they wanted to see the next movie, and maybe they bought a video game that they wouldn't have bought beforehand or whatever. That will never happen with Metroid. If a Metroid movie comes out, at the very least it's going to be PG-13, something like that. Definitely not rated R, but maybe PG-13. Otherwise, I don't think it will be true to Metroid. And again, it's like, what's the cast of characters going to be? There's no real lore built up there, other than that she's this badass bounty hunter that's a female, and she fights this crazy pterodactyl who just seems to just never die and just appear somewhere else. I mean, it's just not as ripe for a film. At the same time, I wouldn't have said Sonic was that great for a film, except they have built that group of characters around him. As goofy and stupid as they may be, Sega has built that group of characters that people could eventually care about if they're handled well in a film. So I honestly do not think that a Metroid film will help the Metroid games in any way. It may help raise the visibility. Like, if there were a Metroid film coming out the week that Metroid Prime 4 came out, do I think it would help bump the sales of Metroid Prime 4? maybe like 5% or something like that. Definitely not on the same level as like a Sonic movie bumps up the sales of Sonic video games. So look, they're different properties. One's targeted at one age group, one's targeted at another. One is about characters and plot, and one really isn't. One's actually intentionally against that. And I think that's really the root of the problem for Metroid. All right, that's it for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything. Again, a big thanks to anybody who asked questions, and we need more for next week. So go to SIFTD.net, click the header there, there's a link. Go to our forums, ask me a question about anything. As you've seen, if you've watched even a couple episodes of this show, I can talk about anything. It's kind of funny. But anyway, a big thanks to anybody who is pledging at that Ask Shane tier at patreon.com/sifted. That's $7 a month. But for $5 a month, you get all our content early. I don't care what you're pledging. You're all awesome. I really appreciate you. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to realize I'm still able to do this, and it's all because of you guys. And if you don't have money, just like this show, comment on the show, share it, all that stuff works. All that makes a big difference. I'd appreciate it very much. So we'll see you guys next Thursday, and don't forget, sleep is for the dead, play games instead.